everybody. When I started preparing this presentation, I had an option to do it in a very traditional way, to come to you today and to tell you in descriptive manner how my previous 7 months were, and to tell you about my set of initial questions, doubts, the process, conclusions if there were any, and new questions that appeared on the way. And that would be quite safe to do, but I decided to give it to myself as a challenge and to try to translate all of these into certain format that can stand for all these aspects that I discovered as relevant during my first phase of research. I constructed text that I will read to you. This is something I usually don't do, but I do it deliberately today because I know that reading in public aloud makes those who listen to the one who is reading wander out from the story they are trying to follow. So while you try to follow the story that is hidden in the text I will be reading, I suspect you will start digressing into your own different paths. And this is something I wanted to encourage, and therefore these papers I gave there, these empty papers and pencils are given to invite you to write down your notes, whatever comes to your mind, any kind of associations you have, questions, whatever crosses your mind while you're listening and following this story, I would like to know about, and I would like to talk about this later, to use it as a base for our discussion, possibly. And I would be happy if you decided to share it with me so that I can use it for my future investigation, because I find this situation also very relevant. I would not use it just as a podium for myself to tell you how I am, but also to get something from you. So I will now go here and start reading. Where now? Who now? When now? Unquestioning. I, say I, unbelieving. Questions. Hypotheses, call them that. Keep going, going on, call that going, call that on. Can it be that one day, off it goes on, that one day I simply stayed in where, instead of going out, in the old way, out to spend day and night, as far away as possible, it wasn't far. Perhaps that is how it began. You think you are simply resting, the better to act when the time comes, or for no reason. And you soon find yourself powerless ever to do anything again. No matter how it happened. It. Say it. Not knowing what. Perhaps I simply ascended at last to an old thing, but I did nothing. I seem to speak. It is not I, about me. It is not about me. These few general remarks to begin with. What am I to do? What shall I do? What should I do? In my situation, how proceed? I was looking for a way to put photographs into words. I didn't know how to break the silence about it. This is a travel story of non-traveling me. This is me being home, where feeling of being home is finally gone, experiencing flashes of the appearance as something that is usually happening only when I'm on the way. With words, you can say anything, you can lie as long as the day, but you cannot lie in the recreation of an experience. I'm learning to drive. The instructor takes me to the parts of the city I don't know from before, to the streets I've never seen. It is an intense experience of being fully focused while circling in an unknown zone. No matter how familiar the place, there is always more to discover. The only exotica is in the neighborhood. Our buildings are our own villages, full of strangeness that is home. A surprising feeling of being at the right place hits me in those rare moments of settlement when I forgive myself for being unsettled. Other times, the feeling of being at the wrong place subsides in motion. So I move. First, viewing is the opposite of knowing. The spectator is held before an appearance in a state of ignorance about the process of production of this appearance and about the reality it conceals. Second, it is the opposite of acting. The spectator remains immobile in her seat, passive. To be a spectator is to be separated from both the capacity to know and the power to act. Most of us move around a lot, but when we move, we often come into contact with those who haven't moved around or have come from different places. This should give us a better understanding of difference. For the governing power, citizens can be equal among themselves, but not equal vis-à-vis others governed by the same power. This contract binds together photographers, photographed persons, and spectators. Each of them fulfills her role. Persons are being taken in photos, photographers take pictures, spectators look, and all of them know what is expected of them and what to expect from the others. This shared set of expectations is a civil knowledge that amounts to more than just a technical skill. Each time we enter a new place, we become one of the ingredients of an existing hybridity, which is really what all local places consist of. By entering that hybrid, we change it, and in each situation, we may play a different role. Is there anything natural? Sight and sight. I go there. I arrive. I'm here. What do I find? What are the relations? What is my role? How many roles I take as tools to define myself and relations I support. The relations between the three parties involved in the photographic act, the photographed person, the photographer, and the spectator, are not mediated through a sovereign power and are not limited to the bounds of a nation-state or economic contract. The users of photography thus re-emerge as people who are not totally identified with the power that governs them and who have new means to look at and show its deeds as well, and eventually to address this power and negotiate with it, citizen and non-citizen alike. In photography, and that is evident in every single photo, there is something that extends beyond the photographer's action, and no photographer, even the most gifted, can claim ownership of what appears in the photograph. When you hear about floods in California, the people who are flooded out are never the ones who live in the mountains. The mountains belong to the rich. There's no danger. It is always housing projects where the poor people live that get flooded. I analyzed an episode 40 years after it happened. I could see things from distance. I put it on a grid. I considered the situation objectively, scientifically, not emotionally. I was interested not in anxiety, but in perspective. I thought it might be smell of the mud, but I was wrong, because mud has a different smell. It is just earth mixed with water. The smell reminds me of a certain period and also of a little example of corruption. It is being built. It fascinates me the most. It is being built as far as it can, but the sea draws the line. The obstacle to what used to be the view becomes the view itself. There is no same image seen from the same place, and what appears as an obstacle to the previous perspective turns into a representative image of the tourist locality from another side today. If the site appears as attractive from distance, by getting closer to the elements of the wholeness, the image that the site initially has formed gets contaminated and ruined. The buildings that one could easily consider aggressive, wild, or ugly, while standing in front of them and participating in this new situation, merge almost subtly with the rest of the surrounding ones when they are observed from the above and from distance. They are added, and they do add to what has already been there. Is there something beautiful about abandoned construction sites? I got distracted by the amount of buildings that didn't fit the frame. They're scattered on the edges of the tourist zones, labeling the zone between known and unknown, being the obvious opposite to the earlier mentioned obstacles. They stand as monuments of unsuccessful business, the monuments which didn't become sightseeing spots nor tourist attractions, but the reminders of the investors' miscalculations when trying to turn untouched zones of landscape into the unknown destinations for the tourists. Stop reading your proposal. What about curriculum? What about the title? What about the titles? When I say goodbye, please don't cry. Google me. The Journey to Ixtlan, Pina Colada All-Inclusive Bracelet South Europe Postcards, The Post Photographer's Guide to Radical Amateur Tourism Subject to Change, an untourist guide leading through precise vagueness and territories out of the frame, eloquently without words. I have no words. The words own me. The need to be postmodern can thus be read as the same as the desire to be a tourist. Both seek to empower modern culture and its conscience by neutralizing everything that might destroy it from within. Post-tourism, postmodernism, and tourism are only the positive form of our collective inarticulateness in the face of the horrors of modernity. Tourism is an alternate strategy for conserving and prolonging the modern and protecting it from its own tendencies towards self-destruction. As I followed the labyrinth diversity of personal geography, lived experience grounded in nature, culture, and history, forming landscape and place, I have to dream a little, as well as listen for the political wake-up calls. I have no home. I haven't paid rent for more than 3 years. I'm trusted either by my friends who have let me feel home at their no homes, or by the state when it invested few times in my travels and contemplation. What if one doesn't exhibit? Could art happen elsewhere? If one doesn't produce visible art, where does art happen? What is around photography, and what is around of what is visible in a picture? Representation is not the act of producing a visible form, but the act of offering an equivalent, something that speech does just as much as photography. The image is not a duplicate of a thing. It is a complex set of relations between the visible and the invisible, the visible and speech, the said and the unsaid. And the voice is not the manifestation of the invisible, opposed to the visible form of the image. It is itself caught up in a process of image construction. Classical rhetoric and poetics have taught us this. There are images in language as well. The production of gestures is more important than production of material things. The maps were to use a key of symbols for rocks, rivers, hills, and trees, and the notes were to pay special attention to any commodities the country had to offer. The writers were instructed to draw the figures and shapes of men and women in their apparel as also their manner in every place as you shall find them differing from us. On a psychological level, it was a game of doubling, where the other is strangely enough experienced as a replica of the self, all the more fearsome because apparently the same. At the heart of the anxiety provoked by such alien presences was a fundamental insecurity, that of a newly established class, not quite at home in its own home. The rooms I was renting, I rented to some other people to spread their microcosmos there, to feel settled for a while. While far away from home, to feel at home is transitory. It follows the rhythm of the moves, as for many, to live is to leave. To come back, to trace them back, the moves, is an intrusive gesture of introspection, housing as a checkpoint of the mental state, not yet seen as a commodity. Memory is a construction, as moving is a necessity. How would feel at home feel like if we were all settled down? I know no other place to come back to but to this permanent moving of mine. But if travel books gave travelers license to write, they also gave writers license to travel. Authors played with the boundaries between eyewitness testimony, second-hand information, and outright invention, and readers were often unsure whether they were reading truth or fiction. Indeed, for the expectations and desires of many readers, it may not have mattered much. It is composed of brief, sometimes quite imagistic, sporadic diary notes, surprising juxtapositions, letters, reported conversations, historical facts, and anecdotes. Much is not explained, with the reader left to fill in. Only near the end does one discover why this journey has been undertaken. I came to Soto Grande this morning to photograph soft fashion, photographic genre I practice in order to pay bills. The shooting location was in the same street where the owner of Zara has his golf field. After the long day, I find myself in a shopping mall in an Italian, almost fancy restaurant. I ordered beer, thinking of connection between self-eroticism and hotel rooms and my relation to myself in front of the front camera, depending on my relationship status. It is my first time in Spain, and the food here is the greatest surprise. I haven't swam in the sea, and I saw Gibraltar distant in mist. On my way to the airport, I take pictures. I wonder, what is the holiday destination for those who locally host tourists? Everyone must go somewhere else and spend money in someone else's home, so that everyone living there will be able to go to someone else's home and spend money, and so on. To emancipate someone else, one must be emancipated oneself. One must know oneself to be a traveler of the mind, similar to all other travelers, an intellectual subject participating in the power common to all intellectual beings. The tourists were first to discover that we now inhabit a world without definite normative, political, or conceptual limits. In serving the post-815 atmosphere of travel in Europe, it is important not to lose sight of continuities that carry across the Napoleonic divide. Not only did the idea of the picturesque live on, stretched, and applied to new purposes, to be sure, but even the classical interests of the ideal grand tourist did not entirely disappear. Nevertheless, most contemporary commentators thought that even if some of the aims of continental traveling remained the same as they were in the 18th century, the victory at Waterloo has ushered in a new era in which opportunity were suddenly rendering the attractions of Europe open to everybody. That is what the word emancipation means: the blurring of the boundary between those who act and those who look, between individuals and members of a collective body. Art is a side that produces a specific sociability. Do you want your art to be understood, and by whom? It is simply the path from what she already knows to what she does not yet know, but which she can learn just as she has learned the rest, which she can learn not in order to occupy the position of the scholar, but so as better to practice the art of translating, of putting her experience into words and her words to the test, of translating her intellectual adventures for others and counter-translating the translations of their own adventures which they present to her. Okay, good. The incident occurred. The site of the incident is there. The leftovers composed in wondrous scene, the absence of causes and actors, the effect, astonishment of a photographer over nothing. Photos of factories say nothing about the social relations that manifest themselves there. Photographs don't speak for themselves. Alone, they do not say a thing. Identifying what is seen does not excuse the spectator from watching the photograph rather than looking at it and from caring for its sense. Seek the truth and you will not find it. Knock at its door and it will not open to you. But its search will serve you in learning to do. Stop drinking at that fountain, but don't for all that stop trying to drink. On this photograph, we can see a building. It is a solitary military hotel in Batutova Street, Belgrade. Here, for more than 20 years, military pensioners are accommodated. Several friends of mine from primary school were placed there temporarily in early 90s after they escaped from Croatia or Bosnia during the war. They were promised flats from the government, but most of my friends and their families still live there. The average size of the apartments is 20 square meters. They have warm water twice a week, and one bathroom is shared between few families. About this building, the media writes only when tragedy happens, as in the case of a collective suicide of a family in which 3-year-old kids survived. Other times, about tragic conditions and lives in this building, only its residents know. Photographing is strictly forbidden. It is forbidden to photograph, but photographs exist. The pictures and videos of celebrations, memories, other life situations exist as in any other building where families live. It is a rich archive of memories set in a reality of these people, where the reality and setting are inseparable and only from inside they are real. This is not reality for the visitors. Visitors are tourists there. They make an excursion to the unknown and go back to their own realities with images of setting as souvenirs. It is not possible that any celebration of difference is something insidious. That is, the sucking of difference out of difference, a movement to the still higher ground of the old arrogant Western ego that wants to see it all, know it all, and take it all in, an ego that is isolated by its belief in its own superiority. If the tourist simply collects experiences of difference, different people, different places, etc., he will emerge as a miniature clone of the old philosophical Western subject, thinking itself unified, central, in control, universal, and so on, mastering otherness and profiting from it. Distance is not an evil to be abolished, but the normal condition of any communication. What is my work here? Is it me who is important, or is it about giving the voice to forgotten ones? How do I turn myself and my activity into a channel for this inside-outside relation? I don't want the distance between outside and inside to grow, so it does sound absurd. I will stay outside, asking myself what one can learn about the interiority of this case without photographing the interior of the house. To make a close-up of this case, I will meet people who live there, talk to them, ask them to show me their family albums, tell me stories, and possibly take another photograph of the building similar to this one, but with its residents looking through their windows as a staged group portrait. There is no final result to this. I spill myself, I watch, unease makes us close. The spectator also acts like the pupil or scholar. She observes, selects, compares, interprets. She links what she sees to a host of other things that she has seen on other stages, in other kinds of plays. She composes her own poem with the elements of the poem before her. She participates in the performance by refashioning it in her own way, by drawing back, for example, from the vital energy that is supposed to transmit in order to make it a pure image and associate this image with a story which she has read or dreamt, experienced, or invented. They are thus both distant spectators and active interpreters of the spectacle offered to them. Awkwardness is helpful in overcoming distance and tension, or at least in creating trust within it. In awkwardness, the weaknesses are occupying the space, and once we dare to share them, we are either closer or more distant. This I know because I photograph people, and all the portraits are results of awkwardness that both sides have overcome. They are attracted to exotic localities, to unique and colorful, though not necessarily to the exclusion of hypermodern or oddball. I do not think that tourists are naturally drawn to these things. They are as smart, as stupid, as well and ill-informed, as gentle and brutal, generous and stingy, curious and close-minded as any random sample of humanity. By the end of the period, however, readers would have expected to see illustrations not only of harbors and important cities, but of native costumes and exotic flora and fauna. I cut his feet. I also cut the half of the body of the security guy in the front of the bookstore. I remember the salesman has reacted to the sound of the zipper of my backpack. He was scared that I maybe stole something. When I asked for Samuel Beckett and the Unnameable, he said they don't have it. Then I found it on the highest shelf. Matthew helped me to catch it and has shown me the list of books he would love to read. First on the top, Walden. I found it quickly. It is one of my favorite books, even though I have never really read it in whole. I believe that this book is not supposed to be read entirely, and that nobody has ever really did so. It is anyhow more important its introduction, rarely translated and included, but if it is mostly translated wrong. It is not on civil disobedience, but on a duty of a citizen to be disobedient. I cut the name of the bookstore. I didn't know that the second part of the movie that we have reminded him of has its first scene filmed exactly in this bookstore that I proposed for our meeting 2 weeks later in Paris. There was no romance. There is no focus either. It was not a book to read, but to reference. The proper place of theory is not in the notes, prefaces, and asides, but is rather embedded in the story to the point that it is not possible to tell where one leaves off and the other one begins. All my notes are images. All the images are files. I go through the files, I construct text, typing and retyping a story. Impersonal procedures tend to magnify subjective choices. These books are silent. They consist of images and words. They do tell stories, two different ones, with some common elements. As objects, they are hardly accessible, almost virtual. They scream out loud, but their voice is muted. Melancholy feeds on its own impotence. If I found my voice, to give myself some space for loudness, I could turn back to my calmness and peacefulness that have long time ago left me and that I miss so much. It is quite hopeless. I should mention before going any further on, that I say aporia without knowing what it means. With the yeses and nos, it is different. They will come back to me as I go along. Tourist is accidental, change the topic, no home, no topic, formulating the formula, observing the process. Your topic is the topic, don't change the topic. Making things accessible does not necessarily making them banal. At the same time, I'm obliged to speak. I shall never be silent, never. I want to make an audio photo book. I would not be surprised if it contained only words. Thank you.